Good morning, everybody. Wisconsin's 25th District Senator Romaine Quinn is back for our monthly chat today, Thursday, February 27th, 2025. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and you are watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin. AFP Wisconsin works to reignite the American dream and break down government barriers that hold us back from our full potential. Visit afpwisconsin.com and join AFP to fight for more freedom for all Wisconsinites. A quick programming note, the school district of Shell Lake will have an operational referendum on April 1st ballot. So tomorrow, Friday the 28th at 8:30 a.m. right here on our Facebook page, School District of Shell Lake Superintendent Todd Fellhofer will be joining us to discuss that referendum and to answer all of your questions live. But today we welcome back to the show our guest who joins us on the last Thursday of every month, Wisconsin's 25th District Senator, Romaine Quinn. Romaine, good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be here. I'm doing well.
Yeah, that doesn't look like you're home. Like every time you're on, it's a different background. Where are you now?
In the office down in Madison. So
you're down there.
Another busy week.
Attaboy.
I'm just not at the desk. I moved over a little bit. So
nice. Well, we have, oh my goodness, a lot to talk about. Budget seems to be a topical thing now.
It's a lot's happened. A lot's happened since we were on our show last.
So I don't know if you saw, I put it on my personal page, Facebook page, I think a couple days ago. MacIver Institute had this article. It was called MacIver's Guide to the 25-27 State Budget, and it was excellent. Like, I learned so much in this article and kind of like where we are in the process right now and how all this stuff works. It was like simple enough for the average person to understand. You can learn some things, but also there's some advanced stuff in there too, which, again, that's where I was learning a whole bunch. So where are we right now in the budget? You're on joint finance, of course, so that's a huge role that you have. First time that you're on there. How's it going, and where are we?
Yeah, so as you recall, the governor did his budget address, was it last week? I think last week, maybe 2 weeks ago.
10 days ago, it was on the 18th. 9 days ago, it was on the 18th.
And so procedurally, that's what kicks off the budget season. It's all the fanfare and theater, of that address. And then we actually get the actual document. We as a joint finance committee statutorily have to introduce it. So we take a vote to introduce his budget. And so now it's officially basically on the table, right? And so now we spend the next month, we work with our fiscal bureau, we call them. It's our bureau of attorneys and analysts that go through and they summarize these 1,900 pages and they put it in layman's terms. And so not only you, but your legislators can understand what the heck's in it and where it goes. And then once we can do like a final analysis, we'll start taking those votes and having those conversations. All right, UW, you want $856 million. We'll bring President Rothman in. What are you going to spend that on? Why do you need that? And we'll start taking votes in finance one by one. Okay, maybe UW, you're not getting $856 million, you're going to get this. And that's safe to say because they're not going to get $856 million. But sorry, Jay, if you're watching the show. So then we'll do that with every department, every line item, and we'll bring these agency heads in and say, what are you asking for? And we can ask tough questions too. How many of your workers are back to the office? What's their productivity? Are you managing that? Are you implementing new technologies, AI technologies, to improve service for the state taxpayers that expect things like that? So it'll be good conversations, and I'm excited to be on that actual panel when we get to bring some of these questions forward.
Well, speaking of that, so in this article, it has there's like 8 basic steps for the budget process. The first has already happened. That was in June of last year, and that governor issues budget guidance to agencies. Second step is agencies submit budget requests. That was done in September of last year. Third step is governor presents budget proposal, which he just did 9 days ago. And it goes on a little more here, and it says Governor Evers presented his executive budget proposal to the legislature at a joint session. Its all funds price tag is $120 billion, of which $50 billion is GPR, which is the general public
Purpose
revenue? Yeah.
Yep.
Basically, isn't that essentially just all of the money that comes from taxpayer dollars? That's like the biggest piece of the pie, isn't it?
State taxpayers. Yep. Those are the hard dollars that come directly out of your wallet that we get to spend on whatever programs we see fit.
Got it. It increases overall taxes by over $2 billion and creates a $1.6 billion structural deficit. The total impact of new taxes, fees, and local taxing authority exceeds $7 billion over the biennium. The legislature introduced this as SB 45, but Republicans said it was dead on arrival. By the way, good morning, Carol, and hey, good morning, Mike Schaefer. By the way, my goodness, he's a grandpa.
I saw that.
Yeah, that's
Congratulations,
awesome.
Mike.
Congratulations, Mike. So is that accurate, kind of where we are, and what are your thoughts? I know you put out a press release. I think I had it up on my phone here, so I didn't forget what it was. After it, your headline was "Governor's budget is same old story, same old song and dance." So you don't seem to be a fan of it. Tell us why.
No, and I would say, right out of the gate, it's just not workable, right? The most irresponsible thing we can do as a legislature or as politicians is intentionally promise something that we can't afford, that I can't sustain for the taxpayers or for the recipients of whatever benefits they are ongoing. And we see this at the federal level. I mean, how do you run for office, saying you're going to balance the budget? Because that means someone's got to take it in the shorts, right, on something. And so, but we don't do that in Wisconsin, right? We have to have a balanced budget. We will balance the budget. There's games you can play, taking on more debt to get around certain things, but we don't get to print money. And at the end of the day, this is what flabbergasts me, right? We have a $4.3 billion surplus sitting in our account that we've carried over from last budget to this budget. So starting out of the gate, not from zero and only getting whatever growth we have to spend on programs, we have $4 billion. The governor still can't figure out how to balance a budget when he starts with a $4 billion surplus to the point where he needs to raise taxes by $2.4 billion. And on top of that, you mentioned the structural deficit, and actually in about 2029, we're looking about being $4 billion upside down. So, I mean, on what planet is that sustainable? It's just simply not, right? And so that's why we kind of said it's dead on arrival. You gave us something that's not workable, which politically great for him, right? Because now he can say, those darn Republicans, they won't work with me. They threw out my budget. Well, yeah, you gave us something that we literally couldn't even start with. Like, how do I start paring back a $4 billion structural deficit? And besides that, we're not raising taxes. I didn't come to Madison to raise taxes on farmers, on manufacturers. Part of the way he's paying for some of this, which I just explained he's not because it's upside down, is repealing the manufacturer and agricultural tax credit. And so what does that do? We have, per capita, we are the heaviest manufacturing state in the country, one of the. We have more people working in manufacturing settings than almost any other state in the country per our population. So we know that's an economic driver for Wisconsin, our agriculture and our manufacturing. And so we want to make sure we're competitive. We don't want our manufacturers to pack up shop and go to Alabama, Georgia, Indiana, some of these other states that compete. And we've seen closures. If you look at Geldwin and Hawkins, that was a punch in the gut in Russ County. You've got a small community. That manufacturer has been there forever, good wages, and that community is reeling right now, and the whole region is because of that. And so at a time where our manufacturers are questioning supply chains, still recovering from COVID, there are conversations about tariffs nationally. The governor wants to throw in almost 8% income tax on top of them overnight when we already have a surplus. So think of the biggest manufacturer in Spooner, right? Whoever that might be. Just walk in the door and tell them overnight, hey, just so you know, the government has a surplus, but you need to pay 8% more in income taxes. So get your checkbook. Like, why would we do that? We're not going to do that. And that's why we said the budget is pretty much dead on arrival.
I thought I saw somewhere in there in the budget. First of all, I didn't read the budget. It's 1,900 pages. I got better things to do with my time. You guys need to read through that stuff.
You pay me to read it for
right,
you.
Exactly. So, but I thought I should say I saw a story. I thought, but I may be misremembering. But is there a new tax bracket that was also introduced? I thought I saw one like for the really rich, and that's where a lot of that money would be coming from.
That raises about $1 billion. And so we're still short. And so if we eliminate that, which we're not going to do that, right? We already have the second highest top earning income tax bracket in the Midwest. That would put us in the top 5 in the country in terms of the highest bracket rate for our highest earners. And we know these people, they have money, they're mobile, and there's a reason they're worth millions of dollars. They're not dumb when it comes to taxes. And they can move their money, they can move their address, they can claim residency somewhere else. So why would you want to drive them out of the state? Again, when we already have a surplus. Like why are we taxing people more when we already overtaxed them 2 years ago and we're starting the budget process with a healthy checkbook balance? And so we were running numbers. We have regular meetings with our fiscal bureau, and one of the charts broke down. So we know exactly how many taxpayers there are in the state. We know exactly how much they make based on a range, and we know exactly what they pay in gross tax in terms of the overall budget. And when you break down the top earners, so anyone making like 150,000 or more, we know how many of them there are, and I think they're like maybe 10% of the total earners, but they pay over a quarter of all the taxes already, right? In income taxes for the state. So at some point, like, when is enough enough? Like, where does it stop? Where does it end? And even with these tax increases, he still doesn't balance the budget. So that's why a lot of this stuff, again, is non-starters. We're going to go back. We're going to make prudent investments in our schools, in our infrastructure and roads, into healthcare. A lot of conversations federally right now on Medicaid and other issues. We're still going to do those things, but we're going to do them in a way that we can afford them ongoing. And I think that's what taxpayers expect us to do.
Yeah. Joseph, by the way, good morning, Renee. And she has morning, fellow natural parents. I think that may be referencing to Renee. Says our governor needs to have better things to do than replacing what a mom should be called. Yeah. Hey, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I see the governor's doubled down now, and they're trying to play it off as, protecting people who use IVF. Up until this point, I've never heard of any couples, gay, bi, straight, that have used IVF that have ever been in legal jeopardy in terms of the process. But I think if there wasn't this such an attack by the left all the time, this would be a non-issue, right? But we've already been dealing with birthing persons and chest feeding, and men can have babies too. And I tell you, I've got a lot of family and friends in the LGBT community, and they read this stuff and they just scratch their head. They're like, "What is this garbage?" Right? They want to live their lives. They're not part of this monolithic voting group that wants to be recognized all the time and whatever. And I mean, these people are just trying to live their lives, and then this stuff pops up, and it puts people in that community in the spotlight in a negative connotation. And it's like, what are we doing here? And besides, if you thought there was a policy, we need to protect a certain class of citizens based on what we reference people in state statute, then write the bill. Why would you put it in a 1,900-page document? That's a budget item. It's a fiscal item. This is not a policy document, which is why we're going to take our first vote we take on finance is to strip all this language out. If it has merit, draft the bill, bring it back. We'll have a hearing and we'll talk about it. Is this a need to protect people's certain legal status through whatever process they're becoming parents? But it's just the insanity of the left. So for them to now turn around and say, you guys are overreacting. Well, you've been doing this to us for years now. And I don't know if they realize there's an election in November, which I think was a repudiation of all this garbage that just is being jammed down our throat culturally. And then it's just they just double down. So that's fine. If those are the priorities I want to talk about. If the governor wants to keep trying to protect men and women's sports, men and women's locker rooms, if they want to double down on, allowing physicians to perform procedures on minors for transgender surgeries, if that's the stuff they want to continue to defend in light of all these electoral losses, hey, cheers, keep at her. But I think the public has just had enough on some of this stuff.
We have a question here from Brian. Doge U.S. aid defunding, including for the Farm Bill and reprogram, and Trump's tariffs will destroy farmers, markets, and lead to bankruptcy. Is this more of a federal? Well, regardless, it was a question. So, what actions are you taking to combat those unhinged actions?
Yeah. Again, we're watching how all this plays out. We have everyone screaming about tariffs. Trump was in office last time for 4 years and used tariffs as a negotiating tool, and the sky didn't fall, the world didn't fall apart, prices didn't skyrocket. That was a different administration that they skyrocketed under, and so I don't believe all the hyperbole. Sorry, I'm getting pop-ups from emails. So I just don't buy that, right? Rationally, they're going to come together, and all I tell people is give the guy a chance. He's been in a few weeks. Give him a chance to govern. He's done more in a few weeks than most presidents do in their whole term. And a lot of this is posturing, right? And you use political posturing to bring people to the table, and all of a sudden you start negotiating and you're making deals. And That's what people elected him to do. So give him a shot. We're going to see how it plays out. And obviously, as a state level, if as things come down, we're going to find ways, if we need to protect particular populations through the budget process or whatever that looks like. But until then, I am not buying into the sky is falling thing. We've heard this rhetoric before. We heard it during his first term, and I think there's been a lot of successes. So let the man do his job.
Well, and that was true too. It doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, isn't the president? It's the same thing. Like when Biden got in, or the other side, Republicans, the sky is falling. Like this happens every single time somebody else gets in.
Mm-hmm.
It just does. I want to go back to the budget thing here. So in terms of the steps that we're on. So according to this, again, this is on MacIver Institute's website. It was the 2025-2027 budget kind of process and overview, kind of helps explain things. And there was 8 steps in the budget process. So the fourth here says agency. I think this may be what you're talking about. So after Governor Evers put out his budget proposal, like what he wanted, the next is agency briefs to legislature. The Joint Finance Committee, which you're on, will invite select department heads to answer questions about their agencies and their requests. Is that kind of the stuff that you've been doing now?
So we haven't done that officially yet.
Okay.
We're still waiting for our final summaries for the 1,900 pages, and then that's when that process will start. And then there'll also be a road show, right? We'll take the budget out on the road. We'll do public listening sessions. I've requested one in our district somewhere in northern Wisconsin. Not Wausau. People think Wausau is northern Wisconsin, but it's not. There's
It's
life north of the
ish,
Dells. You're right. Yeah.
ish,
So
northern-ish.
so then the public will have an opportunity too, right? Maybe they come in and they say we love Governor Evers' budget, adopt it as is. Maybe they love the new plans that are out, whatever it looks like, right? But people can come in their issue area and explain, here's the needs for people in Spooner and in
Mm.
Anago and in Shell Lake and in Tomahawk, right? And they have an opportunity to weigh in. So, and we're taking that input now. If there's things in the budget you like, what are they? Then let's work on trying to keep them in. What does that look like? And
What?
then and what's affordable, right? In the whole picture,
Well, there's
what's
that.
affordable and what,
Yeah.
what do we keep in going
Well, and that was
forward?
the next step here, 5. And I'm wondering, what you haven't actually done this. This is the first time you've been on Joint Finance. So you haven't done any public hearings, but it says step 5 is public hearings. JFC will travel to at least 4 locations around the state to hold public hearings in March and April. Those hearings
Yep.
are most attended by local and state special interests. Almost no private citizens attend or speak at those hearings, although they certainly could if they wanted to. Now, you actually haven't gone through any of these, so, and I don't know if you've ever attended one in the past, so maybe you don't really know, but so what is the virtue behind doing these, doing the public hearings?
So I've gone to a number of them over the
Okay.
years. So when I was first elected in 2014 in the assembly, I asked the finance committee to come up, and they held a hearing in Rice Lake at UW-Barron County on the campus. Again, giving local people the opportunity to come forward and say, this is why this program in Medicaid is important to me. This is why this program in forestry I care about, right? And so it gives you an opportunity to directly make comments to the finance committee that's going to be crafting the budget, right? Anyone can call their state rep, their state senator, but here's your chance to address the actual budget committee in person. And I think that's really important to provide that to people, right? And so the governor will do his listening sessions that, people show up. I don't know how far in advance he schedules them or who's invited, but this is really wide open. We'll pick a school, we'll go in a gym, so you can fit 2, 4, 600 people in there, and then the finance committee will sit there all day until everyone's done. Everyone gets a shot. Everyone gets 3 minutes.
Mm.
So some of the days get long, but then that's where I think MacGyver mentioned, like, interest groups will then alert their members, hey, finance is going to be in Wausau today. Show up and make sure you talk about XYZ,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of them, they're private citizens, but
I
sometimes I'm
understand.
sure it can get kind of hijacked by particular interest groups, whatever that may be. But again,
Yep.
that's the process, right?
Yep.
Everyone gets a shot to be heard. Everyone can say what they want in the budget, and then finance takes that input, and we continue to craft that, going
Yeah.
up and down in every department.
So there's 2 left here in terms of the process. Then floor votes. JFC will take at least a month and a half to hammer out the budget bill. Afterwards, it goes to the Assembly and Senate for floor debates. It is not amended. Oh, shoot. You know what? I skipped a step. Executive hearings. I skipped one. I'm sorry. JFC will begin executive sessions in late April where they assemble the actual budget bill agency by agency. They usually start by throwing out the governor's budget proposal and starting from base, which I thought was funny. Like, we're just going to
Yep.
throw that all out, just basically start over. That means picking up spending right where the last budget left off. And then there's floor votes, and then, of course, the governor vetoes. Finally, the governor reviews the budget bill, crosses out anything he doesn't like using his line item veto, and signs it into law. It goes into effect July 1st. If it's not ready by then, spending continues at the level set by the state budget until the new budget becomes law. So you've been
Correct.
obviously now on JFC. See, we just fact checked it. Thank you. We
Yep.
don't ever do fact checking on these shows. We probably should. Um, are you enjoying this part of it? Or is it more than you thought it was going to be?
It's still early yet, but so right now, everyone and their brother wants a meeting, right? Because they want to get in here, get their name in the door, because either they want to keep something in the budget, or need to add something in the budget. Because then as members, we're able to draft and make individual budget motions that we try. So we'll pre-meet. So like Senator Stachel, myself, Senator Wimberger, Senator Teston, Senator Markline, and Senator Brandley make up the Republican Senate side. And so we'll do a pre-meet, and I'll go into that meeting, and I'll say, "Hey, you guys, give me what I want. Like here are my asks, right? Whether it's getting the trail crossing done in Trigo, where the DOT screwed up the crossing, and we need an underpass now for snowmobile and four-wheelers. Whether it's county forest asks. I've got a bill we're working on that's a tax credit to reinvest in our short line rail lines in northern Wisconsin to get those lines back to health supporting their forestry industry. So I got to convince them. So let's say like, okay, we take a little mini vote. They agree to that. And then Howard Markline, our co-chair, then goes to the assembly side, their chair, and says, hey, our side wants this. And then hopefully my stuff makes it. But that's where you need someone on the other side, like Karen Hurd or Shannon Zimmerman or the other members, Representative Dahlman, to say, hey, I'm asking for this. I'd really like it if you'd support this. When you do your pre-meet, tell your colleagues why, and then hopefully we can keep it in. And then we'll take votes as a whole committee whether or not we include individual motions in the budget, besides the up and down on agencies, our particular asks on stuff. And they're not, I wouldn't say describe them as like earmarks, but I might have an opinion on what we should spend on schools, right? I want to see the formula, this much in general aid, this much in a low revenue adjustment for districts like Spooner and what have you, right? Mm-hmm. And so then we'll negotiate those up and down again for every department in the state.
Sure. We have a question here from Kevin. I read where Evers removed items from the budget that would have benefited seniors. Why do seniors continue to be ignored?
I'd love to chat, Kevin, on that. I'm not sure what in particular. There's a lot of things in this budget that I think hurt a lot of people. So, particular for seniors, last session we tried to pass a tax cut to stop taxing retirement income for the first $75,000 for a single earner, retiree, or up to $150,000 for a retired couple. So you would pay no income tax on your state retirement. It's something we can afford. It's something we can build into the base structurally going forward. And it helps us retain our seniors. I don't want you to move to Florida, Kevin, or anyone. I don't want you to claim residency in Texas or in Arizona. And I can't change the weather, but we can change our tax climate. And I don't want you to make that decision based upon I don't pay income taxes in Florida, or I don't pay income taxes in Arizona or other states, right? And so how do we keep you here to spend time with your grandkids and to spend your money here? And we want you to be a part of the stay in Wisconsin. And so we could do that, and the governor vetoed it. And of course, you'll always hear tax cuts for the wealthy. I'm like, we use the income metrics that he gave us. We asked, how do you define middle class? And so we used his own numbers, and he still vetoed it. So we might bring that back as part of a tax cut package. We're always working on, what might he sign, what might he not sign. But happy to look at particulars in the budget regarding seniors alone and have that discussion.
How can he reach out to you? What email address?
Call our
office.
Email our office.
Okay.
Yep.
You probably don't even know the email address to your own office, do you?
I do. It's sen.quinn at legis, legis.wisconsin.gov.
Hopefully somebody's writing that down.
Just Google it.
Just Google. That's what I do. Another question for Brian. House Republicans just voted to slash Medicaid and Medicare funding by $808 billion. How will Wisconsin react to that massive defunding for state benefits and services?
So the way that played out, it's not a direct cut, but the committee is assigned with finding those savings, and they're predominantly overseeing Medicaid, right? And so it's $880 billion over 10 years. It's not a 1-year cut, so it's 86 billion a year. And someone was crunching numbers. How does that break out Wisconsin's total? I think it's like 1.6 billion in supposed cuts, if it even happens, right? And so, yeah, it's something that we're going to look at. Are there areas we have to backfill? Are there areas where we have to look at savings ourselves? I think there's a lot of reform in Medicaid that can happen where we can actually find some savings. As an example, I've talked for years about um, like school districts, right? We've had to change a lot over the years and try to get our staff to realize we're not just users of healthcare. We need to be consumers of healthcare. And so, how do we shop around? How do we make good financial decisions? How do we get people to schedule an appointment and go see a doctor instead of going to the ER and those expensive visits? Right now, I hear stories all the time where you've got people on Medicaid where there's no copay, and if there's no deductible, the, the first thing they'll do is run into the ER. And there's no cost to them, right? But going into the ER is much more expensive than getting an appointment with a doctor. I've had nurses call me where people have come back to the ER same day for things that they could just schedule an appointment and go see. It's not an emergency, but you pay for that. The taxpayers pay for that, and there's no incentive. So could there be a $5 copay for a doctor's visit, a $20 copay, something where it's like, okay, it costs me $20 to go to the ER, so I'll schedule an appointment and I'll get in on Friday. If it's not an emergency, if you're having an emergency, go to the ER.
Right.
But there's no incentive and there's no structural ability, and hospitals can't tell you come back and schedule an appointment. They can't deny you care. And so taxpayers just keep paying for it. So there's a lot of accountability I think we can find and do better with in that program. And we'll see what that looks like. Now, is there going to be $1.6 billion in Wisconsin alone in savings? Probably not. And then, yeah, maybe we have to make more investments in Medicaid on a state level. Maybe other states should too. I don't know. I mean, the federal government's broke. What everyone ignores in all this is that the federal government is broke. They are broke. And they are barreling towards a fiscal cliff, and they keep borrowing. Even in this budget with these cuts, they're raising the debt ceiling.
I know.
Again, right? And so if we can't, I mean, they're still not balancing the budget yet. I mean, we need growth. There's all those conversations. But you guys, at the end of the day, you're kicking the can down the road. And even on the Republican side, everyone's a Republican until their program gets cut, right? Like, I don't care about this. Cut that.
Yeah.
Don't cut my stuff.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you don't like what's going on, you should be mad at the politicians who put us in this spot in the first place. I said this about Act 10. If the budget was balanced and people did the right thing, there never would have been a Scott Walker. There never would have been an Act 10. There never would have been these swings in government, right? So don't blame the people that are trying to make the change now. Blame the people who were in office that put us to the point where we have to make these decisions in the first place.
I have a question. In this article, I want to. Do you know about incremental budgeting versus what's the other one? Performance-based budgeting. So it says in here, Wisconsin is. It says in here, Wisconsin is one of 43 states that use incremental budgeting. Each budget's spending level become the starting point for the next budget. That's why every budget inevitably spends more than the previous one. Wisconsin has put the pieces in place to transition to performance-based budgeting, which holds agency spending more accountable, but has never taken the final step to make that change. Again, you're new to the not new to Madison as the former assembly and now in Senate, but new to the JFC. Are you familiar with that? Did that ever come up at all? Because I didn't really understand what that. I understood what that says, but I don't know what that means.
So when we say we're throwing out the governor's budget and we're going back to base and we're going to work from the ground up, we're just going back to last year's level of spending. So we're not going to, no uppers right away. We're starting from scratch, but it's where we're at today, and then we'll build from there. I think they're talking about if you want to truly go back to base, go all the way back to base. Let's start this budget at zero, not at 40 billion.
Okay.
Start at zero and then truly build it back up and make them justify all their spending. So,
okay.
I mean, that's what the federal government's kind of doing. I think at some point we should seriously look at that because agencies should have to justify their existence. We always do. We do it in the private sector. Things change. And so I think there's huge opportunities with the oncoming of AI, advancing technology. And while we're doing this, the governor's doubling down on more bureaucracy, larger state government. We should be finding efficiencies. He's going the other way. He adds 1,300 new state employees just in the state budget. 20% increase in spending, 1,300 new state employees, 2.4 billion in tax
That's more than the
increases.
last time, wasn't it? Last time I think it was, I
Yep,
think it was less on all of those numbers last time.
right. And structural deficit. You name it all, right? So he's doing the exact opposite of what the federal government's doing. And I think what taxpayers want, we want a full review. If you're spending $1 billion in this program, great. What's in it? Are you earning your keep? Are you going to the office every day? Can you reply to an email with 4 bullet points telling me what you do and your job? And if not, you're fired, right?
Right,
So
right.
I think taxpayers expect that. There's not a lot of sympathy for federal workers who have healthcare coverage forever once they leave, etc. There's nothing wrong, and we'll have conversations about Act 10, what public employees should earn, shouldn't they earn. Again, everyone loves our truck drivers, our snowplow drivers, our police officers, our teachers. We value our public employees. It's just this always push and pull of, what can we afford and what's fair. As you have the private sector who you might be lucky to have a 3% employer match on your 401k. And now Act 10 is probably going to fall. Or we're going to go back to the days where public employees don't contribute anything to their pensions. And we should talk about that, Ben, because I actually pulled up numbers. You're a county supervisor. If Act 10 goes down and public employees no longer contribute their half to WRS, I think for Washburn County alone,
Uh-oh.
you would have to find $738,000 in your budget. Now, I know you're going through your budget process right now, but I don't know if you have $750,000 laying around in
That's
your
a big
Washburn
chunk of
County budget.
change.
And what does that go to? You're picking up the employees' responsibility for their retirement of the Wisconsin pension system. So that's not 700 grand you're adding services or putting more cops on the ground. You're paying that to existing employees. So you're not going to be able to find it. So what are you going to cut? Like I think in like the shared revenue package we gave you, like not you, Washburn County got like a $400,000 up or 300,000 ongoing in the base. Like that's that's gone. I know it's already gone. You guys give raises and you treat your employees well, but like how do we go back to that? It's almost $1 billion if Act 10 goes down statewide on
And
public
Washburn
employee
County is a small. I mean, it's
contributions.
we got like 15 or 16,000 people. Uh,
Yep,
isn't there? Wasn't there something in? Was it Governor? I think it was in Governor's Evers's proposal, or maybe it was. I think it was. I was talking to Dave Wilson, who's also well, you know Dave, also Washington Board Supervisor. And yesterday, he said that he talked to you recently, something about like a 0.5%. It's not like a tax levy increase, but it was something about a 0.5% increase for something. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, "Well, ask Romaine." And I forgot about it until just now. What is
sure.
this about?
I think the counties are asking for another 0.5% sales tax to
Sales
fund all
tax.
the stuff you do. Yep. And so I'm supportive of user taxes, of the sales tax. We know almost a quarter of our sales tax is paid for by people outside the state. I see nothing wrong with making Minnesotans pay our roads and fund our infrastructure and other things
Is
that
this a
that you do
Republican
day
or a
to day.
Democrat thing? Seriously, because I don't ever care about that stuff. I really don't. You know me. I don't. I don't. But inevitably, it has to be a Republican or a Democrat thing, which is stupid.
Sure.
It should just be issue based, and it just be does this make sense or doesn't it? But is this
Yep.
going to be, or is it already a Republicans want this, so therefore Democrats now you all know you should be against it, or vice versa? Maybe Democrats for it, and now all Republicans should know that you're against it. Is this a political thing?
I would say it's the natural divide between the parties of just we generally don't like to raise taxes,
Right.
and the other side I don't think cares. So it ends up being it's our side holding this back, right? And so at the end of
Sure.
the day, is a 0.5% increase in the sales tax something anyone's going to see? No. But I think we should be looking at a bigger picture. I would love to pay an 8% sales tax statewide and not pay property taxes. Or could we have a 8% sales tax and not have income taxes, right? I think there's different ways we can do this. I hate property taxes. It's archaic. It feels like you don't ever own your home. And so I think we should find ways to get rid of that. And if that means like if you could levy a percent in sales tax and you get rid of your whole county levy, why not? Like why can't we look at that? But then the key is making sure you don't actually levy property taxes. There's got to be a trade-off, right? Because some communities, oh, thanks for the new money, and by the way, we're not going to cut our property tax levy, right? So there's ways I think globally we should be looking at this. And to Dave's point, that's a conversation. How do we fund services. Why in Washburn County does 15,000 people have to maintain infrastructure for 100,000 people during the summer? How do you afford that? Why do the locals have to fund EMS year round and front the whole bill by themselves while people from out of state are using it when they come to the cabin and the campground? So how do we make that fair? How do we make that sustainable so local taxpayers in Washburn County aren't footing the bill for people that recreate? And how do you grab that? Maybe it's sales tax, right?
Interesting. I forgot to go back. I'm trying to read through some of these. I'm trying to find actual questions. This one really wasn't, but I always love talking about marijuana because it gets everybody fired up, and that's why I enjoy it. Let's legalize weed. Where is that in the, at some point, I think you and I have talked in the past, or I should say I have said in the past to you that at some point
Sure.
I feel like Republicans are going to just have to get on board with this because you're going to start losing elections because it is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Is there any talk about either recreational or anything on the marijuana topic at all in terms of legalization in this year?
Yeah, I mean, we always have this conversation. We should have done medical a decade ago
Exactly.
and just at least taken that off the table. I was one of the first ones to sign on, like, right to try. Like, if there's actually any kind of substance that helps with a chronic illness, why would we stay in the way of you being able to responsibly use that? There are different ideas, even on medical marijuana. The Assembly wants state-owned and run dispensaries. I don't want state-owned and run
Why not? Why
dispensaries.
don't you want
Let
that?
the market play it out. Why would I want to grow government? Why would I want to grow more state employees, more state facilities to manage the dispensing of medical marijuana? We don't do that. I don't have state-owned pharmacies. You don't go to a state-owned facility to pick up your
Oh, right.
medication when your doctor prescribes it, right? Like, I don't want to be in that business. I don't want the state to be in that business.
Yeah,
And so then we have two different ideas, and then we don't pass either of them.
of course.
And then we sit here, and then a year from now, you're going to say, "What about marijuana?" Because that's where some of this falls, right? Or I think some might be for decriminalizing, but not for full recreational, right? You'll get a civil forfeiture if you're caught selling or whatever, versus using at home in the privacy of your own home.
Hmm.
And so I've always kind of said, if you pay your taxes, don't neglect your kids, and don't abuse your spouse, and you go to work every day, I really don't care what you do in the confines of your home, right? Just be a good person, be a productive member of society. And so I don't know where that'll wind up.
All right. All right. Well, we went through a lot of questions, and I see a lot of comments, but I'm not seeing a specific question. I apologize if there is one, and I'm not seeing it. Crash will create
Oh,
funding.
I just see the link now. There's a lot of comments on here.
Yeah. Oh, there's one. There's one.
Hold
Oh,
up.
from Brian again. There we go. Do you approve the dismantling of? Okay. All right. So again, it'd be great if we had more questions that were directed towards Wisconsin.
Yeah, Brian, you should give Tom Tiffany a call.
Yeah. Brian, you should. Yeah, right. He comes on the second Thursday of every month. I think these
Sure.
are kind of more questions for him, but that's okay. Again, if there's a question, we'll try to get it up and put it back up. Do you approve the dismantling of congressionally created and funded agencies and mass firing of civil servants by unelected billionaire Elon Musk with zero congressional review or approval?
Yeah, I mean, if someone's not doing their job, they should be fired. It's that simple.
There you
We'll
go.
see how we'll see how it all plays out, right? And
Yeah,
there could be mistakes made where, okay, this agency does function properly and it's needed. I mean, there's always different interests, right? There's different views on the farm bill. There's different views. Congress can't agree on all this stuff. So there's going to be different pressures from congressmen and women, defending certain things they need for their state or whatever that looks like. So again, we're going to see how it plays out. Give the guy a chance to lead. And at the end of the day, if you're mad about some of these cuts, you should be mad about people who spent $36 trillion of your grandchildren's money that put us here in the first place. But no one's complaining about that. It's so easy for us, right, to promise something we can't afford and then not ever have a consequence. And we don't get to do that at the state level. And they're finally trying to rectify it at the federal level. And there could be some pain, but I think voters voted for change. They didn't vote for the status quo. They didn't vote to continue the current administration. And it was, in my mind, really a repudiation. So we'll see what that looks like.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. So speaking of Dave Wilson, when we were on the phone yesterday, this came up because he knows some people that have been impacted by the layoffs or basically the firings and et cetera, whatever. And some of it closer to home, and that it changes things a little bit, right? With somebody that kind of a thing. But we're
Yep.
kind of walking through it, and I remember even asking him, like, does this change your opinion about now that it's somebody that you know, it's easy to say, "Oh, we should absolutely do this," but now it's somebody you know. Does that change it at all? And we discussed that for a little while. And I love analogies because they always get me in trouble, which I love them. But I said it's kind of like being like say there was a mom and her boyfriend, or say husband, whatever, and they have kids, and they allow the kids to stay up until midnight, like the dad does, or whenever. You can have your phone whenever you want, eat cookies and cake and junk and stuff, and don't care about your grades or follow up. But then they go through divorce, and now the new dad comes in. Let's say that person gets remarried, and now the stepdad is like, okay, hold on. No, we're going to have a bedtime at 9 o'clock. You're going to bring your homework home. We're going to follow up. So all of a sudden it's doing this, and the kids are going, oh, I hate this person now.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of going back to what you're saying, it's like, yeah, but I wasn't the one who created this to begin with. Like, this should have
Right.
always been happening from the beginning. You never should have gotten this out of control.
Right. And we're seeing that, the conflict we have with Governor Evers trying to get state employees back to work. We know some people should be able to work from home. Some positions don't need you to be in office, in an office space. And if that's fine, great. I'll sell the office building. Why are we maintaining this footprint?
Right.
But there's certain people that we don't even know. The audit came out, I think 95% of DPI's employees in Wisconsin do not go to the office.
What?
They all work from home. We're like, are they managing the productivity? Are their managers making sure things are continuing? Like, that's fine. Come to us and say, hey, here's our output. Here's our tasks. Department's getting the job done. Even with these people at home, we're monitoring their ability to actually, are they in front of the computer, or are they just watching TV and eating chips? So we know that. But then come to us and say that. We have agencies who don't know that. We have agencies that can't tell us who's in the office and who's at home right now. And so when you come and ask for a 10% increase, I'm going to ask that question. How many of your employees are at work? How many of your employees are at home? What are you doing to monitor productivity between home life and work life? And what metrics are you using to determine that, right? I mean, technology changes. COVID exacerbated this. A lot of things can be done from at home, but as a taxpayer, you're sitting here going, what do you mean we don't know who's going to work? And then the most insulting part is, like, during COVID, you've got professionals that couldn't get their license renewed.
Oh, I
And
remember that.
at Dispus, right? We had a nurse practitioner that was trying to come from Duluth and practice in Iron River, and she waited for 6 months for someone at the Department of Professional Safety and Professional Services to approve her license as already an active practitioner in Duluth. And so think of all the people in Iron River that missed out on free care those 6 months because someone was at home or didn't do their job to get this license approved until we made a phone call. And then a day later it was approved, right? So that's the kind of stuff where, taxpayers are fed up. We want to know there's accountability. We value our employees. We value the people that do the day-to-day functions. We need government to function, but we want accountability. And all this stuff's coming to light. The USAID, USAID, it's just all the stuff we see, and it's like, it irks people, and rightfully so. And they're going to keep digging in. I think we're going to see a lot more of what's been going on over the years.
I'll leave it with this. So actually, my dad has a question. He probably doesn't know because we haven't put up the post yet. But tomorrow, the Shell Lake superintendent, Todd Fellhofer, is going to be on a show to discuss the referendum. And when is Wisconsin going to address the school funding problem? Shell Lake is looking for a $4 million referendum. Levy limits and per student funding is not enough anymore for small schools. I know you and I touched on the education piece a little bit last show, I think, and that's a huge component to all of this. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
So there's a wide range of thoughts on this, right? There's probably people in this building that would say, Shell Lake, half your kids are close enough to Cumberland and half your kids are close enough to Spooner. Maybe you just shouldn't exist as a district. Maybe these kids should be bussed up. The buildings in Cumberland and Spooner can fit the amount of kids that they take in without having to add on, and maybe they should consolidate. Now, I'm not in that vein of thinking. I think overall, which is an interesting conversation because we have all these problems with MPS right now, the Milwaukee Public School System. And all my colleagues that were always on the consolidation bandwagon are now like, we need to break up MPS. They're too big. I'm like, see, exactly. Why do you want all these kids in one giant monolithic system that's very hard to control, that could be very hard for accountability for not only taxpayers, parents, the school board. So I think it's an investment to be able to keep schools. Let's pick whatever size it is the sweet spot, 800 kids, 600 kids, 1,200 kids. and maintain that infrastructure, because you can maintain a culture in that building of respect, of learning, of just the setting of that school much better in a smaller setting. So, to Terry's point, how do we fund that? Our formula is funds on a per pupil basis. Like every district, like 75% of us are in declining enrollment. If you went into Shell Lake, I'm sure there was 200 more kids in that building graduating every year 10 years ago. Everyone is slowly declining. So how do you continue to fund a district that was built for 1,000 kids and now there's only 700 in the building? But you still have the utilities, you still have the fixed costs. And when you lose kids, they're not always easily to cut a staff, right? If I lose 2 4th graders, 2 5th graders, 3 7th graders, and a senior, I can't cut one teacher, right?
Sure.
To reflect that. If it wasn't like, if I could reduce a grade because it was all a small kindergarten class, that's fine. I could cut a kindergarten teacher. But when it's chronically spread out, who loses their job? Where do I make the efficiency, right? So a lot of times you can't. So we're having these conversations. It's educating other members. We're actually working with Fiscal Bureau right now to try to develop some kind of a new formula to say, especially those that are very remote. You think of like Drummond, Winter, Birchwood, some of those areas where if that school closed, these kids are already on the bus for an hour and a half, right? They have to exist. So no matter how small they get, we have to find a way that says you have to be open for the students that are left, because there's no other place to go, and we can't fund you just based on their per pupil amount, because 11,000 a kid over 200 kids is not a lot compared to 11,000 over 1,000 kids, right? There's no economies of scale, things like that. So we're looking at that. It's a tough conversation to have because it's very easy for legislators and the governor to give everyone a per pupil amount and then walk away. Everyone got something. Everyone's happy. But it doesn't take into account the intricate costs and differences between our districts, high cost transportation aid, all those other things. So,
and especially those districts are right next to each other. Right. And you go from Shell Lake to Spooner, and Spooner would be getting, I'm like $1,500 more per student than Shell, and it's right next door to each other, and it's kind of weird. So on that MacIver Institute story, it said here, but this was their recommendations on a few of them. There's some good ones, and it said, introduce new school funding and shared revenue plans. Nobody likes the current school funding formula. It pits districts against each other for resources, which entails advertising campaigns to attract students through open enrollment. Every district suspects other districts are getting more from the state. State lawmakers worry about what's going on in the districts that they don't represent because too much aid is involved. That's just a small sample of the complaints. It's time for the state to adopt a new school finance system. So that kind of brings up the question of, is the current model that we're using fixable, or is it broken and we just need something new? And if so, that's got to be a massive project. This is not, okay, maybe this year we'll completely reinvent our education funding system. Do you think this is fixable with our current model?
I think it's fixable partly because I don't know how else we would do it. So I've been a big complainer about the formula. Like if you look at some of our larger districts, Spooner, Birchwood, they get very little general aid. It almost falls solely on the property taxpayers to bear that burden. But it's set up in a way where it's to equalize the tax rate across the state. And so whether you're in Superior or Spooner or Cameron or Anago, the idea is no one should pay an exorbitantly higher amount of taxes locally to make that work. So since a Spooner has a very large tax base, lots of lakes, a lot of ground, value's gone up, the rate you're paying in Spooner, although you're bearing the brunt, a vast majority of the cost of educating a student, your tax rate on average should be the same as someone in Rice Lake. Rice Lake might get more aid based on the property value of that district. And so if we got away from that, I don't know how we do it. Because if we just turned around and said, okay, every kid, here's a check from the state, every kid gets the same, locals figure it out. We have local districts that literally couldn't raise the property taxes high enough to keep their school open.
To offset the remaining of the cost, because obviously the state wouldn't be able to put all of it in.
Like a prairie farm. Yeah. Very agricultural in southern Barron County. Not a lot of tax base, no lakes. Like they couldn't tax themselves enough to keep their school open without the general aid formula, right? So I think it's workable. I think it has to be workable because I don't know an alternative.
How else, right?
But that's where we make the incremental changes that fix problems. Don't just blow up general aid. Don't just throw $1 billion at whatever. Raise the low revenue ceiling district or amount for Spooner and Shell Lake, so they can start compete, even that playing field. And I think we can go a long way on that.
All right, what do you have coming up this week, tomorrow? How about today? What are you doing today? You're down still in Madison. How long are you down there for?
I leave today.
Oh.
I've got an interview right after this with a Duluth media about our bill for the city of Superior, allowing them to access federal monies for lead line replacement. They're the only utility in the state, because they're private, that gets denied funding. And so we want to help ratepayers in Superior as well. Meetings in Eau Claire tomorrow. So as the new chair of insurance, I'm getting lots of requests from other people in the industry.
You're the chair of insurance?
And housing and forestry and rural issues. So it's one of the subject areas. So
we need to talk about that. I didn't know that. We should talk about that on one of the well, right now it's going to be budget stuff, but you come on every month. At some point, especially after you've been doing it for a while, I'd really like to learn more about what that is. What falls under that umbrella. That'd be really interesting.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to do. Meetings all day tomorrow. I might stop out. Some people are ice fishing Saturday up in Washburn County. Might make an appearance there. And then Monday, it's back at it. I've got meetings all day somewhere in the district Monday. I wake up and look at my calendar, and then I figure out where I got to go for the day.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And then back down here next week, we caucus, off-site, so we can start talking about where our colleagues at in the budget. What do you see? What kind of level of spending are you comfortable with? Because there's no budget if we don't have the votes, right? So, lots of stuff going on, lots of meetings, just trying to stay ahead of all this before we start taking the budget.
Awesome. Thanks, Romaine. We'll see you next month, huh?
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. Special thank you to Wisconsin's 25th District Senator Romaine Quinn for taking the time to come on for a chat today. A reminder, tomorrow I'll be chatting with the Shell Lake School Superintendent Todd Fellhofer to discuss the school operations referendum, which will be on the April 1st ballot. So until then, for DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden saying thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.